Hey everyone, it's Jim
And Charles.
from Valves and More, an online vintage tube store. And today, in Tube Lab number 151, we're going to talk about our continued rebasing project and the 3 early 7N7s that we spent the week rebasing. But first, caution everyone, electronics and tube amplifiers can have very high voltages present, which can be lethal. Exercise extreme caution when working around them. Always consult a professional technician when in doubt. Well, our rebasing Loctal project continues with 3 very interesting early 7N7s. Now, one is a rare and much sought after version of the 6SN7 GTW. Another is a variation of the famous 6SN7 GT, also known as the Bad Boys. And the last tube is equivalent to the first generation GTA straight plate, which is one of my desert island choices. So, we had a lot of chores to do this week, and
A lot of orders to fill.
and we got slammed last weekend. In fact, it was the second busiest weekend in the history of the business, and we just caught up this morning with the last box to ship.
Yeah, that's how many orders came in.
Yeah, and we sold more Uris in 2 days than we've sold in the last year. Mm-hmm. And Charles, you're kind of hoping that monoblock with more reviews in the store might be saved.
Well, I think once people start using it with efficient speakers and realize that, 2 watts is enough to really fill a room with some great sound, opinions might start changing. I mean, I can understand why people are hesitant, but until you hear them, you just don't know.
Yeah.
And, oh man, did they ever sound good.
Yeah, and it's a unique kind of, I think it's interesting, pure Class A is absolutely amazing for acoustic music, for jazz, vocals, choral, small ensemble. But each Class A amp that I've designed and built has been they've all been quite a bit different from each other. They all sound great, but the Uris, that's my baby. That's my first original monoblock design, and it's the simplest too. I mean, the circuit is very, very simple.
Yeah, I mean, most of it is point to point, except for the power supply board. And, the 6P7S being a 6L6 equivalent, it's a great sounding tube. So.
Yep. Yeah, and I'd like to take all of the credit for the sonics, but really it comes down to those 2 choices. The driver's tube is the amazing CV6 type. Mm-hmm. And that power tube, there's something special about that power tube, I swear.
Oh, they sound great. Yeah.
Well, Charles, this really has been your thing. I mean, I did most of the rebasing work, but you've done the research on these. So why don't you walk everybody through these 3 very interesting tubes?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So either it was last week or it was the week before, we were taking a look at the different versions of these rebase 7N7 tubes, and we made a little bit of a flub. We thought that all these sort of short bottle chrome dome tubes were essentially GTA equivalents. And we were a little bit right, but also a little bit wrong. And what was going on here is that there were 3 different versions of the octal base tubes that had been converted over into something that looked very similar. And without looking closer, it was hard to tell the difference. They all have these back-to-back straight plates on them. They all have these beautiful big chrome domes.
And this is a tube we know and love in the octal version as the Slovenia 6SN7 GTA.
Yep, so you can see we've got this one marked with an A now, so we're differentiating them. So this is essentially the GTA, and how can we tell the difference? Well, the secret is all in these micas. I'm going to see if I can get that better on camera, maybe with a little less glare there for you.
See if your focus is good. Yeah, your focus is really good.
Yeah. So these bottom micas tell the whole story here, and we can use those to match them up with the octal equivalents because they were using the same micas for the same tubes in the octal versions. So the GTAs had these 2
prong micas on each side.
This is just on the bottom, right? We
Yep.
can't even see the top mica.
And actually, I think most of the top micas are the same. This one has 3 prongs on it, and this is equivalent of the Bad Boys. They were the only tube, as far as we can tell, in the GT to GTA range that had these 3 prongs on their micas.
Now the getter is flipped on the octal version of the Bad Boy. The getter's on the bottom, and in the Loctal version, they flip the getter on top.
Yeah, it's essentially like they've inverted the tube. I mean, the 3 prong mica is on the top as well, so it's like they flipped the whole thing upside down, which is kind of interesting.
And of course, the getter may have some very small effect on the overall sound of the tube, but probably not much.
The other tube that we have here is actually something that we only have a couple of examples of because they're incredibly rare, which is the 6SN7W. And these are similar to the tall boys that we've been selling a lot of, by the way. We've been getting a lot of really good feedback about those tubes.
In fact, we've got a number of customers that have come back
Immediately after getting them.
Yeah, in fact, one customer came back 3 times for more tubes. Now,
Yeah.
maybe the flash sale last weekend
Prompted that a little bit, but
Yeah.
as soon as people hear them, as soon as people see them, they want more. And so this is, you could call it a contemporary to that tube, but a shorter bottle version of it. And it has a rounded bottom mica and is equivalent of the 6SN7W, which again is one of the very first military spec versions that Sylvania ever made.
Now, this one doesn't have the copper support post.
It doesn't, but funny enough, it has the spot where it's supposed to go. And I could be wrong about this, but we might actually have some of these with that support post in storage that we still have to do some rebasing.
I think
on.
we've got them in the store already.
Oh, maybe.
Maybe, yeah, I think we might have only made a couple of them, because even as Loctals, they're rare tubes.
So this goes to show that even we can make mistakes with identification. It does happen sometimes, especially when the tubes all look very close to each other.
And they were all made basically in the same time period. We're talking about...
Probably all within a decade of each other, I would say.
Yeah, we're talking about late 1930s throughout the 40s, and that's... So roughly the span of 10 years during the Second World War years. And of course the W was a military...
Was a military spec tube, yeah.
Yeah.
So
But we've also seen the Bad Boys with the Jan on them as well. So they were Joint Army Navy tubes
Yeah.
as well. I mean, in any large war like the Second World War, you know,
They were taking anything they could get.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, funny anecdote about that. One of our suppliers, we're in Canada, of course, was telling us about how there were certain tubes sold in Canada that were being produced, and they didn't quite meet the standards for what a tube should have been. They weren't quite testing as well. But because of the demand for good tubes for the war effort, even if a tube wasn't testing 100% new old stock like it should have at the factory, they were selling them on the consumer market and marking them with a special mark on the box that said that they weren't good enough for the war effort, but they were good enough for the home radio. So they were still using everything they could there.
And they probably were rationed. So if a tube that was dropped by the Army or Navy or Air Force showed up in your local radio shop, you probably were grateful to get something.
If it was still running, yeah.
Now, you've got a selection of boxes. You've got a box fetish, don't you?
A little bit. I love the artwork. I love the old boxes. And I've been wanting to spread that around to everybody that's been ordering these beautiful rebase tubes.
Now, these are all Sylvanias, but the boxes, none of them say Sylvania. So
No.
why don't you show off some of these boxes?
No, we do have some beautiful Sylvania boxes, and we have been sending some out, but I've also been making an attempt to send out some of other brands because I think they're fun, and I think people would enjoy them. So we've got a great example here made by Sheldon. Well, the box is made by Sheldon. Of course, the tube was a Sylvania.
But look down at the bottom there.
Let's see.
Can
if
you
we
get
can
it on focus?
Yeah.
So it turns out Sheldon was a division of Allied Electronics. Now, Allied, if you'd probably have to be a little older than me. I was sort of a Heathkit era kid. But in the U.S., Allied was just huge. They had a big, giant, fun catalog, and people could buy tube tester kits and anything electronic they had. And I didn't actually realize that they had tubes, but they had tubes.
Yeah.
So there you go.
So that's one example. We've got a great vintage GE box here that's in excellent condition. We rarely find GE boxes that are this old that look this nice.
And of course it's got a 7N7 on the end.
There we go.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show even all the big players rebranded Sylvania tubes whenever they needed to sell Loctals to people.
Yeah, because nobody but Sylvania basically had Loctals, with just their couple minor exceptions.
And of course, second to finding them as Sylvania branded, we also find a lot of Philco, because Philco worked closely with Sylvania, and I believe they merged at one point, or
I think
Sylvania bought them.
Yeah, I think Sylvania probably bought them out. And of course, Philco was a radio manufacturer initially. And then they went on to do home audio, and I'm sure they did other electronics. But
well, they really championed the Loctals too. So you see a lot of Loctals that are branded Philco.
Yeah, Philco and Sylvania were hand in hand for Loctals. So I would say maybe a quarter of the Loctals we get are Philco branded.
Something like that, yeah. And this one is really neat. I like the artwork on them. Some of the tall boys that we have gotten in came in these boxes, and they're just beautiful tubes and beautiful boxes. That's a Heinz and Kaufmann Limited electronic tube, Gamatron. it's I don't know what these guys were making, but they have really nice boxes, and they've got a fun name to say.
And they had some amazing tubes inside those boxes.
Oh yeah,
all Sylvania, of course.
Yeah, and there's so many more. We've got every rebrand under the sun. We've got a box for these tubes. If you want something specific, go ahead and put it in your note in the order, and I'll see if I can find something for you. Otherwise, I'll just try to include something fun.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is the Loctals had some of the nicest vintage boxes. I don't know why that was, but
I think a lot of them were just stored away and left where they were.
Abandoned until you discovered them or rediscovered them. There's been some hobbyists playing around with Loctals for years.
Yeah, of course. And, a lot of the oldest boxes are degrading, and that's just unavoidable. But we do have a lot of really nice condition boxes like these guys here that are left over.
Right, and we'll keep sending out new old stock boxes as long as we have them. A lot of the Loctals we brought in actually came in flats, so they arrived bulk packed, so there are no boxes. But we'll send boxes. Well, we have boxes
if we have them. Yeah.
Well, okay, enough blah blah blah. How about we listen to some comparisons and see what you all think about how these three tubes sound and differentiate. We're going to use this. This is a sort of a development Charles has come up with. We're going to use the same track. It's got lovely vocals. Audiophiles will often use it as a mid-range test track. And one of our problems is finding a test track that's got a great natural bass line and a great mid-range and a great treble. Normally you can't have all, and a soundstage. You can't normally have all those things combined. So in this case, we're going to highlight the mid-range. And the vocal range of these tubes, which will allow you to sort of compare it. Now we're going to take the feed direct off our universal 6 or 12 SN7 kit preamp. This is the new version 3.0. And okay, well let's roll it, Charles.
Sunshine when he's gone. It's not warm when he's away. Ain't no sunshine when he's gone, and he's always gone too long. Anytime he goes away, I wonder this time where he's gone. Wonder how long he's gonna stay. Ain't no sunshine when he's gone, and this house just ain't no home anytime he goes away. I know when he's gone, always gone too long. Anytime he goes away, anytime he goes away, anytime he goes.
Wow, that sounded amazing. That's one of my favorite test tracks.
Yeah, we listened to it quite a bit here.
Yeah, and there's, even though all three tubes sound very similar, there's some variations on them. I mean, the one thing in general that I like a lot is that is the stage piano that that she's playing has a very natural sound through these tubes, which is, in case you don't know it, a great way to test how close a system is reproducing the mid-range is to play a good piano track, because it's hard to get a piano note to sound right on any system or through any tube, and a lot of parts of systems will flub that. So, and I was really floored. Her piano, often sounds sort of a little slightly off in some configurations in our system, but with these tubes,
yeah, sometimes it can sound a little bit harsh or a little bit distorted, but no, it sounded great with these guys.
It sounded very, very natural, and of course her voice was full and rich with good dynamics. There's a nice guitar track at the beginning that opens up the song that sounds very clean and clear. And
all three of these are just really good sounding tubes.
Yeah, and even though there's not a lot of bass in that track, when we played our test tracks with bass on it, wow, the bass is... Now, I'm not talking about thumpa thumpa.
No.
I'm talking about a good, natural sounding bass that's fully present.
And that's something that the early Sylvania tubes are known for, especially the Bad Boys.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And I think in the Bad Boys case, the bass might be just slightly forward, though it's the only tube maybe in that line. Now, I'm not convinced that I really want that, but so long as you get all the bass that's recorded, I'm happy.
Well, it's hard to reproduce it sometimes, so having a little bit forward can sometimes help things out a little bit too.
And we're probably going to do another episode talking about bass reproduction, because if there's one part of the music spectrum that's really hard to do, and I mean everywhere, from the studio to putting it down on tape originally, to mastering, to
reproducing,
to on a vinyl record, it's it's really difficult to do bass properly.
Part of the reason why the RIAA curve exists.
Yeah, I mean, it's easier digitally, but then there's a lot of holdovers digitally, you know, when they're remastering from analog, in which it just gets lost or it was never there. And then, you know, it gets even worse. Your speakers, your room. Anyways, I'm doing the episode.
Rambling a little bit now.
Yeah, I am. Anyways, we actually, even though over the last couple of weeks we've got thousands of tubes in, and we talked about a lot of them, I think, last week.
Yeah.
This is all that really came in this week, and I made them. Well, I remade them.
Yeah, rebased them, yeah.
So it took a whole week to do enough to get them in the store. Mm-hmm. So anyways, if you've hung on this long, here's some codes to help you out. Now, we can get around the world pretty much everywhere, with only a few exceptions, with a flat rate $20 shipping fee. If your order is $150 or more after discount, the shipping's on us, folks. And this week, I don't know, did anybody pay for shipping? Well, the kit amps have to pay for shipping.
Yeah, but I think that's about it.
That's about it. And of course, we got some discount codes, and some of you smart customers have realized that there's a hidden code after this, and it's been costing us money.
A little bit, but, you know, thanks to all of our viewers that are helping the store out and took advantage of the sale. You've been fantastic. You kept us really busy the last week.
Yeah, and that's what that special discount was all about, was our viewers. It's always nice to, you know, give a big warm hug and a thank you.
Yep.
Stay safe, everyone. Have fun. This is Jim.
And Charles.
Signing off. Cheers, everyone.